So for this video, I will be discussing my one-hit wonder authors. And as a caveat for this, I will not be including authors that I've only read one book from. So for example, Imaginary Friend by Stephen Chbosky. He's written 2 books, but I've only read Imaginary Friend. And then there's a lot of classics like Frankenstein, Flowers for Algernon, To Kill a Mockingbird, and Picture of Dorian Gray. I've only read one book by those authors. But for this video, I have 10 authors to display here that I've read multiple books from, or I've at least attempted multiple books from, but I've only enjoyed one of their books. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into the video. So like I mentioned, I have 10 authors to display here for y'all. 6 of them I own physically and the 4 of them I don't. So let's go ahead and start with the ones that I own physically. And first off, we have Rachel Hawkins. And the book that I obviously like by this author is The Wife Upstairs. And when I first read this book, I loved it, gave it 5 stars. Still to this day, one of my favorite thrillers that I've ever read. But at the same time, I'm kind of questioning it because I've since read 2 of her other books that came out after this, Reckless Girls and The Villa. And both of those books, well, actually, no. Reckless Girls, I gave 2.5 stars. I kind of liked the beginning of it, but then the direction it went in, I really didn't like it. And then The Villa is just straight up one of the dumbest thrillers that I've ever read. Gave it 2 stars. So I will not be trying any more Rachel Hawkins just because I believe she is a one-hit wonder. And honestly, I'm kind of afraid to go back to reread this book just because I really did not like her other books. Maybe I read this book wrong. Like maybe if I go back and read it, like I won't like it as much as I remember liking it. But from what I remember, this thriller just did such an amazing job with the characters and the plot and the ending. So I really loved this book, but I've tried several books by her, and this is the only one that I've loved. Another thriller writer that's very similar to Rachel Hawkins. I've read one book by them, loved it, and then everything else I've tried to read by them just has not come close at all. And of course, I'm talking about B.A. Paris, and the book that I've loved is right here, Behind Closed Doors. Still to this day, one of my all-time favorite thrillers. I loved this book. A lot of people don't love it just because there's not necessarily like a surprise twist to it. But for me, there doesn't always have to be a twist in thrillers. Kind of the thing about this book that I love is that this character is put in a dire situation. You're just wondering how the heck she's going to get out of it. And the conclusion to the story of how she gets out of her situation is really good and really tense. And it also just has one of the most despicable antagonists, like just somebody that I wish I could just jump into the book and just punch him in the face. Like one of those kind of guys. So yeah, this book was really awesome. But then all the other books that I've tried by her have just not been good. The Breakdown, I think I gave like 3 stars. That was a generous 3 stars because that one kind of revolved around a twist. But the twist was so painfully obvious that I'm like, there's got to be more to this, right? But there's not. So that book, while it was well written, was just kind of not that great. And then I read The Therapist by her, and one of the most forgettable, I don't remember anything about that book. I gave it 2 stars, did not enjoy it. So, and I think I tried to read another one of her books, and it did not go very well. I probably DNF'd it. I don't even remember what it's called. But anyway, Behind Closed Doors was amazing, and her other books are just not very good. So definitely a one-hit wonder author for me personally. So this next one, you know, like those other authors I've read and attempted multiple books from. This next author, I've read one book, really liked it, but before this, I attempted another one of her books and DNF'd it. But I believe those are the only 2 novels she has written, so it is what it is. But I'm, of course, talking about Susanna Clarke, and the book that I obviously loved was Piranesi. Those 2 thrillers I've only read once, but this one I have read multiple times, I believe 2 or 3 times, and it's just as good as the first time that I read it. 5 stars easily, one of my favorite fantasy standalones, and just one of my favorite standalones ever. It's such a unique story with such unique writing, and I really love it. I love the characters. I love everything about this story, how weird it gets. But her other book, which is arguably even more popular, her other book is Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. That one I got like halfway through. It's a 1,000-page tome, if you didn't know, which is which was very weird because I saw this and I was like, she wrote that and then she wrote this, like 200-page story. Like, okay. But yeah, I got like halfway through that book and I DNF'd it. I just didn't really get along with the very slow, methodical pace and the writing style. The characters were somewhat interesting, and there were interesting moments kind of sprinkled in throughout. But honestly, that book was just not for me. So I was very pleasantly surprised when I just decided to randomly pick this book up and loved it. So the contrast between those two, very interesting. If she comes out with another novel, I will probably read it, and then hopefully it's more along the lines of Pierre Nessie and not Jonathan Strange. But yeah, I think the dichotomy of that is pretty interesting. But yeah, I love this book, and so far, it's the only book that I love by this author. And an example of an author that I've read one book in its entirety and really enjoyed it, but then have DNF'd everything else that I've attempted to read by her, is Helen Oyeyemi. And the book that I really enjoy is Mr. Fox. Not a perfect book, but when I read it, I really enjoyed it and gave it 4 stars. I thought it was just one of the weirdest and wackiest books that I've ever read. It's kind of a pseudo short story collection where this guy is kind of talking about, like, he can't write short stories without killing off a female character. And he's just kind of going, like, showing you his short stories and kind of how weird they can get. And at the end, he inevitably kills the woman. And he's just like, oh, I keep doing this. It's a very weird book / collection. Very weird. And often a lot of her books are very kind of weird and literary in nature. So I thought it would be kind of an interesting journey to check out her books. But so far, every other book that I've tried to read by her, I have not gotten into. I DNF'd Gingerbread like 40 pages in, just a bunch of utter nonsense. I DNF'd it. And then her short story collection, which is called This, I DNF'd the first short story. I was like, okay, maybe that one's not for me. And then I just kept going further and further, and I just did not like any of those short stories. There are other books that I can try by her, but I'm kind of scared to, and I'm just kind of confident that this might be the only one for me. But yeah, this book was really good. Her other ones, not so much. These next 2 books have caveats because I could potentially read more by these authors, and this could change. But for right now, this one's a definite caveat, and y'all might get a little mad at me, but I'll explain. I'm holding up The Arithmetist by Brandon Sanderson. Now, obviously, calm down. Brandon Sanderson is one of my all-time favorite authors, but I mainly love his adult books, especially in the Cosmere. Whenever I've tried to read his young adult middle grade stuff, it's just not been for me. So, like The Reckoners, I DNF'd that first book. Skyward, I DNF'd that book. And then I don't even know if I've tried to read the middle grade stuff, but I don't know. But The Arithmetist, I was pleasantly surprised. I really enjoyed this book and gave it 4.5 stars. Eagerly awaiting the sequel, whenever that's going to come out. Probably never, but who knows. This book was really good, and I really enjoyed it. But sadly, it's the only kind of middle grade or young adult book that I've enjoyed by Sanderson. Obviously, I've enjoyed most of his adult books, especially set in the Cosmere. So, as a caveat, I'm talking about Sanderson's middle grade young adult. So far, The Arithmetist is a one-hit wonder. Also, another caveat, because I do plan on reading more by this author, and a lot of his books do sound intriguing to me, and I will definitely be reading more from him specifically this year, because over on the Book Astronomy Discord, we do have a read-along going where we're reading one of his books per month. I won't be checking out all of them, but I'm certainly going to be checking out a lot of them. And that would, of course, be John Mars. And the book that I really love by him is obviously The Passengers, the book that I'm holding up right now. This book was really good. I gave it 4.5 stars, very fast-paced, and it's just a really fun time. But sadly, the other book that I finished by him, Keep It in the Family, I did not really have a great time with. Gave it a generous 3 stars. That book, kind of the audiobook ruined the twist. So if you're going to read that book, don't read the audiobook or don't listen to it, because it kind of just gives it away. So read that one physically. And then the other one that I DNF'd was The One, which was surprising because that was one of the more exciting ones that I wanted to read, but I didn't really like the writing. I didn't like the structure. Y'all know I don't love short chapters, and that has like 100 chapters and like a 300-page book, so I didn't really like that. But I will say that there are definitely books that I'm interested in reading. One of them is The Good Samaritan, which that just has a crazy premise. I'm hoping to enjoy more of his books so that he can be taken off of the one-hit wonders list. But so far, I've attempted 3 books, and so far, The Passengers is a one-hit wonder, technically. All right, so the next 4 authors I don't own physically, but I'm going to talk about them here anyway. One of them will be The Chain by Adrian McKinty. Now, I've read 2 of his books. The Chain was not perfect, but it was really good, especially the first, I would say like 60% of that book was like 5-star material. I didn't love the direction that it went into the last third of it, but it was still really good, gave it 4 stars, very solid thriller. So I was very excited to read his new book that came out a couple years ago called The Island. However, that book sucked. I gave it 2 stars, did not love the characters, a lot of weird decisions made by the author, and just that book was all over the place bad. Gave it 2 stars. I haven't read anything else by this author, and I'm kind of thinking that I might not, but maybe. I don't know. I don't even know if he has new books out yet, but the Chain was stellar, really good. Not perfect, but very good. The Island sucked. So, one-hit wonder. Again, another author that I've only read 2 books from, but kind of vastly different experiences would be Taylor Adams. And the one that I really liked was The Last Word. One of my all-time favorite thrillers. Definitely probably top 5, but definitely top 10. I loved that book. Thoroughly enjoyed it. But the first book that I read by them was No Exit. And that book wasn't bad, but I was definitely underwhelmed. I gave it 3 stars, I think, and it was fine. Like, it wasn't great, it wasn't terrible, it was fine. So definitely vastly different experiences. The Last Word, one of my all-time favorite thrillers. No Exit, meh. So definitely a one-hit wonder for me. I will definitely be checking out more from Taylor Adams whenever they release more books. Or I don't even know if that's the only 2 books they have or if there's more. But so far, one-hit wonder. Also, probably a popular choice for this would be Ernest Cline. So obviously, the book that I really love is Ready Player 2. Just kidding. It's Ready Player 1. Just a fantastic experience. 5 stars. One of the best kind of sci-fi books I've ever read. And then the other 2 books, obviously Ready Player 2, I have not read. I've heard terrible things from. So I'm just going to avoid that at all cost. But then his other book, Armada, I was definitely excited to read when it first came out. And I DNF'd it about halfway through. I just did not care at all for the story or the characters. It felt very derivative of other stories that I've read. And yeah, so Ready Player One, definitely a one-hit wonder for me. And the last author I have to talk about for my one-hit wonder authors is Cormac McCarthy, which might upset some of y'all because he does have a lot of very prominent books. But for me personally, the one book that I really enjoyed, the one book that I could see myself going back to reread, is No Country for Old Men. I've enjoyed some of his other books, but honestly, they're not books that I would ever consider going back to reread. And also, he had a few books that I thought were fairly overrated, especially The Road, which a lot of people, that's some of their favorite books of all time. But for me, The Road, I did not enjoy my time with it. Thought it was overrated. And yeah, so I won't go into further detail about that. But No Country for Old Men was really good, really entertaining. I gave it 4 stars. Maybe upon a reread, I would maybe upon a reread, I would even give it 4.5 or 5 stars because it is a book that I think about a lot. So that one I could consider going back to reread. But all of his other books, they've either they've been bad, like I didn't really like The Road, or they've been okay or good, but certainly not books upon my favorites of all time or books that I would ever consider rereading. So No Country for Old Men, for me, is definitely a one-hit wonder. All right, so that is my video for one-hit wonder authors. Again, these are all authors that I've attempted or read multiple books from, not counting authors that I've only read 1 book from. So yeah, we'll see if this list changes. Maybe I'll do an update maybe not yearly, but like I'll eventually make an update and see if any of these changes. My prediction is that John Mars will definitely change because I definitely plan on reading a lot more from him specifically this year. So hopefully that changes. There's probably some that will never change because like Rachel Hawkins and B.A. Paris, I just don't really have any plans to check out any more of their books. They're still coming out with books and I'm just not excited for them. So some of these will change. Probably some of these will be permanent, but we'll see. Definitely let me know what you guys think, especially of the authors that I mentioned here. Do you agree with me? Do you like multiple books from these authors, or do you disagree with me? Leave those lovely comments down below. Also, who are some of your one-hit wonder authors? They can either be authors you've only read one book from or authors you've read multiple books from, but definitely let me know down below who are your one-hit wonders. I want to know. Please let me know. And of course, please consider subscribing to the channel. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up and continue to subscribe for more content. I have the Bookastromer Discord, like I mentioned down below, where we've got tons of read-alongs and buddy reads happening. And I have my Patreon link down below if you want to support me there for as little as $1 a month. And I have my Amazon wishlist if you'd like to buy me a book. Thank you guys so much for watching and have a fantastic day.